Mark 5:21 to 43. When Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she'll be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed around him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, "If I just touch his clothes, I will be healed." Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once she realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes? You see the people crowding against you, his disciples injured, and yet you ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet. Trembling with fear, told the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bother the teacher anymore?" Overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, "Don't be afraid, just believe." He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, John, the brother of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with the people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, "Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead but asleep." But they laughed at him. After he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. At this they were completely astonished. He gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this and told them to give her something to eat. So this is if you look at this story from Jairus' perspective, he was obviously very anxious. His daughter was on the verge of death, gonna die any minute. He's a synagogue leader, so this was an unpopular thing he was doing according to his peers, but he didn't care. He went to him because he loved his daughter. And then as he finally gets to the teacher, Jesus, brings him back, but the crowd is just so much, it just slows him down. And he's probably just so pissed right now, just trying to, plow through this crowd. And the whole thing stops. He has to stop because Jesus says something like, it says, "Who touched me?" in this giant crowd. And then he stops to find out who touched him. So that would cause a little bit of anxiety, like, man, why are we stopping? Let's just go. And that's a lack of faith. That's doubt talking, We're on Jesus' time. He's in control. He is all powerful. His timing is perfect. We don't have to force our timelines on him because his timing is perfect. So in the culture, this is probably like, this woman would be considered like lowest of the low. Like you don't talk about this in public. You keep this to yourself and you stay away from everyone, because if she's bleeding like this, she touches anyone, that person is considered unclean. So it's a huge cultural no-no, and it's interesting how she tried a lot of different treatments before coming to Jesus, which is how we often do things. We'll go to some popular therapist or read some popular self-help book, and those things might help a little bit, but ultimately we need to get changed. We need to get reborn. We need to be changed from the root, and self-help books can't do that. it comes down to going to Jesus. It's also interesting how he healed her and he didn't even mean to. So it says a lot about the power of faith. Back to, I guess, Jairus. I went off track. Tell from Jairus' perspective first. So after all that, like his worst, people say, like, usually what you're nervous about never happens. Well, his biggest fear, what he was most nervous about, happened. During all this time of Jesus taking his sweet old time talking to this woman who's unclean and bottom of the barrel in that culture, his servants come out and tell her, it's too late, don't bother, your daughter's dead. And his heart just broke right there. His heart sank. But Jesus, hearing them, goes to Jairus, comforts him, and says, don't be afraid, just believe. And those words can carry you pretty far. I mean, if you know Jesus, know his character, know his power, know that know how good he is, and he tells you, don't be afraid, just believe. That's basically like the gospel message right there. Don't be afraid, just believe. Jesus is here to save the day. So they continue to the house, and people were crying and wailing. And then Jesus says, the child is not dead but asleep. And immediately they change tones and start laughing. I probably would have laughed too, man. I just like laughing at ridiculous things. I tend to make jokes and laugh at things that I probably shouldn't, and they just make me into a clown, man. God made us to be more than lovable clowns, and God made us to, have a pleasure in things greater than laughing. Sometimes laughing just cheapens things, which is what this did. Like, it just made them fools. They're just mocking. If all you do is mock, it just like, the only joy you get is in that moment of laughing, but I don't know, it gets old. Just don't mock, because what happens is, like, because they mock, they weren't worthy to witness that miracle, witness that beautiful moment. The only ones that were allowed to witness that were the mom, the dad, and Jesus and the disciples, because it's such a precious moment. And it was impossible, it just was not compatible to have them there in that special moment. So Jesus kicked him out. And then the girl stood up. He told her to get up, and immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around. And he gave him strict orders not to tell anyone. It's gonna be pretty hard to do. Like, people knew. Like, what are they gonna say? Like, oh yeah, she wasn't dead actually. But like, I don't know how they would not tell anyone. But Jesus gives them strict orders: don't tell anyone, and give her something to eat, which just goes to show a practical side of things. From you read the Bible and you think all pretty much just in terms of miracles, but just from a health perspective, I mean, this girl was sick for a long time. They didn't have intubation tubes. They didn't have a way of feeding a patient that was unconscious at all. Like, they couldn't, there's no feeding tubes back then. So this girl was probably out and hadn't had anything for days. So Jesus, on the practical side, to give her something to eat. Back to that, the woman with the bleeding issue. Honestly, I don't understand, what's with the touching of the clothes? Why was she thinking, man, if only I touch his clothes, that'll be enough? And I heard one Pastor Paul, Calvary Chapel, whatever, in Ontario, He said like it's important because it's just like a crux, like it's a touch point of faith. It's a touch point of faith where if I just do this, then Jesus will come through. Then I'll be healed. I'll be honest, like in my experience, like a lot of times, like it's not like I'll have something like that, like, oh, if I just do this, then Jesus will come through, and a lot of times he doesn't. I mean, that's just how it is. He just doesn't, and I don't know why that is. Right now, it's come down to if I'm just patient and wait and depend on Him, then Jesus will come through, because that's really all I have. I don't have any touch points of faith, I guess, like this woman had. Not really. But Jesus has His own reasons for that. I won't. Yeah, I mean, that's whatever. Yeah, I don't know why Jesus says no sometimes, like to acts of faith. I think he looking back, like once you see the big picture, we only see the here and now. He sees the bigger picture, and you can depend on His goodness. He's not messing with you. He's not trying to sabotage you. He is only good. And if He says no, it's because you're not ready for the blessing, and He needs time. It's a process. He's not just going to zap you into a fully mature man or woman. It takes time, and He wants to do it slow and right. Roots take a long time to grow, and that's what he does often in our waiting time.